But Reggie is the founder and president of the YALE team. He's obviously, the former Bronco from 91 to 96. He graduated Texas State University, and really have enjoyed getting to know him. And also one thing I didn't know, he's published 6 books. So I would like to find out more about those. So let's please welcome Reggie Rivers.
Yes, thank you for that applause, and we will be doing Q&A at the end of my presentation, but I appreciate that one person applause. It just takes one. Thank you so kindly. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I want to talk to you about a topic I'm calling the asymptomatic spread of racism, sexism, homophobism, anti-Semitism, and how we inadvertently sometimes are part of this asymptomatic spread, even though we don't want to be. And I'm really impressed. I appreciate you inviting me to come here and have this conversation, because what's happening in our country right now, I think these conversations are so important. I'm very impressed by your culture of care program that you had already embarked upon before all of this started, and your commitment to this, because you guys are the makers in the industry. You guys are the owners, the decision makers, the leaders, the people who set the direction of your industry, and these changes can't happen without you. And I applaud you for taking the steps that you've already taken and will continue to take in the years to come. And I want to start off, I'm going to share my screen here, and I want to start off with just a funny joke, a Chris Rock joke. This is a clean one, so nobody has to worry about that. But let me go to this slide here. So this is Chris Rock, 30 seconds of Chris Rock.
We live in a crazy time where Dr. King and Mr. Mandela's dreams are coming true, and black people and white people and Asians, Indians, and everybody's hanging out together to have interracial posses. It's unbelievable what's going on, man. Unbelievable. 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 All my black friends have a bunch of white friends, and all my white friends have one black friend.
All right, so I wanted to show you that because there is some truth to that. I'm going to share my perspective with you this morning, and this is my family. On the right is me and my wife Stephanie and our son Malik, who's now 17. He was 13 in that picture. And then on the left is my family that I grew up with. Those are my 4 siblings, my 2 sisters, my 2 brothers, and my parents. And my parents are still alive. They live in Dayton, Ohio. But I'm going to share my perspective with you. But it's been interesting over the past 6 months, as all of this has been happening in the world, that it really is true that most of my white friends have one black friend, and that's me. And our society is still fairly segregated for a wide variety of reasons, but we're fairly segregated. And so sometimes to understand the black perspective, you might not have someone you know and trust to talk to about some of these really thorny and important issues. And so I've had a lot of conversations with my friends who own businesses or senior leaders in businesses, and it's been really interesting conversations about what's going on. And so today I'm just going to share my perspective, and I'm very aware that my perspective is just my perspective. There's some truth in my perspective, but it's my perspective. You might have a different perspective, and there's some truth in your perspective as well. And hopefully there's some overlap in our 2 perspectives, and that allows us to start to understand each other better. But there may be no overlap, and that's a reality too. But we can all gain from hearing each other's perspectives and kind of having a broader understanding of how these issues in our society are affecting us. All right, so very quickly, I want to talk about this asymptomatic spread of racism, sexism, and other isms, and how it happens and how easily it happens. I want to share a metaphor about an article that I wrote in the Denver Post about Labrador retrievers and Rottweilers and how we can use that to understand how systemic racism happens. I want to talk about the concept of privilege and what it is and what privileges I have. I don't want to give you a speech telling you all about the privileges that you have. I want to kind of explain the privilege that I have as a way of understanding what privilege is and how it manifests itself in our daily lives. And then talk about the tense and often violent relationship that Black people have always had with the police. This might feel new to you, that the things that are happening. But for us, this has always been true. What's new is that more and more of it is getting caught on video. And it's been really encouraging the way that our nation has responded to this video evidence, that people, I think, are really starting to understand that this has been a persistent problem for a long time. And then finally, I want to just describe my perspective and the perspective of many Black people on Colin Kaepernick's peaceful protest 4 years ago in light of what's happening right now. All right, so first thing, when we talk about racism, most of us tend to think, do I have any overt symptoms of racism or sexism or any other isms? And the answer is typically no. I don't, you know, if you're evaluating yourself, you say, I don't use the N-word, I don't tell racist jokes, I don't make racial decisions in my hiring, I don't discourage people of different races from getting promotions and all of that. I don't do any of that, and neither do any of my friends. I never hear that around me at the country club or at the gym or at wherever I go. I don't hear that, and so I don't perceive that there is a problem with racism in our country because I don't see any overt symptoms of it. But there's a different question: is am I an asymptomatic carrier of an ism, racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobism, whatever it is? Am I an asymptomatic carrier? And the answer for most of us is going to be an instinctive, no, I'm not. But I had to realize in myself that I contribute to the asymptomatic spread of sexism. And before, you could not have convinced me that this was true about me. I feel that I am not sexist at all. I love women, I respect women, I hire women, I empower women, I encourage women, I believe in women's equality. I support women's causes. I feel like I'm an ally to women in their fight for equality in the workplace and in every other part of life. I am an ally for women. I am not sexist at all. I had to recognize that, yes, that's all true. And yet I am a man. And yet I am part of the patriarchy. And yet I grew up in this culture that says men are better. Men are more valuable. Men are more important. Men are the thing and women are the other thing, right? We're the show and they're the sideshow. I grew up in that culture and I contribute to the asymptomatic spread of sexism. And I want to share two very simple examples that kind of started to wake me up to my own male privilege. I spent a lot of time in various boardrooms. Sometimes I'm in the same boardroom over and over with a company. Sometimes it's my first time in that particular boardroom, but I speak to a lot of different companies, so I end up in a lot of these meetings. And I started to notice that no matter what boardroom I was in, if I was going to make a point, and I raised my hand, I said, hey, I got an idea. And it took me 60 seconds to get that point out. I was not going to be interrupted during that 60 seconds. People would wait and I would finish my thought. And it was true pretty much of all the men who spoke in these meetings. And I was noticing that it wasn't true for the women. A woman would start to talk and she'd start to make her point, and within 15 to 20 seconds, she would get interrupted. And maybe it's an interruption to clarify something she just said. Maybe it's an interruption to argue with something she just said. Maybe it's an interruption to turn in a different direction altogether, but she would just get interrupted. And I noticed it once and I noticed it twice. And then I started to pay attention to it. And I noticed it was almost like every time it was happening. In every meeting that I was in, it was happening multiple times. And I started to understand that this is part of my privilege as a man, that when I have an idea, my idea is going to be heard. My idea is going to be respected. My idea might be acted upon. I might get a raise because of my idea. My career might advance because of my idea. It has all these multiplying and rippling effects. Just being heard in these meetings has that impact. If women can't be heard in these meetings, their ideas aren't heard. Their ideas aren't acted upon, their ideas aren't celebrated, their ideas don't lead to promotions for them, and so they start to decline in comparison to the men in the room. And so I started to understand that's one simple example of my privilege as a man. Another one is that I'm praised for taking care of my son. We have one child, he's now 17, but back when he was in elementary school, well, before I tell you what happened in elementary school, let me just tell you, my wife, both my sisters who work in corporate America, all of my female friends virtually all of them have told me a similar story. They said, when I started my career, an older woman took me aside, a role model took me aside, and she said, listen, if you need to take your son to, or your daughter to a doctor's appointment, don't say that you're taking your kid to a doctor's appointment. Just say, I'm taking the afternoon off. If your kid is sick and you can't come to work, don't call in and say, I've got to stay home because my kid is sick. You just say, I'm taking a personal day. If you admit to your bosses that you can't do your work because you got to take care of your kids, it feeds this stereotype that they have that women can't balance work and home, and it'll hurt your career. You won't get the promotions. Every woman I know in business has heard that speech in one way or another. I've never heard that speech as a man. In fact, if I say, hey, I need to leave because I got to take my son to a dentist appointment, I am practically going to get a medal. I mean, that people got to be, what? Reggie, you're leaving work to take your son to the dentist? Oh my God, this guy is amazing. Look, hey, everybody, come here. Reggie's taking his son to the dentist office. Can you believe this guy? What don't you do, Reggie? You are amazing. It is incredible. You're nominated for Father of the Year, man. This is the best. I mean, this is a real thing. I practically get a ticker tape parade on my way out the door. This is part of my privilege as a man, that as a man, anything that I do with my children is a big check mark on my account. For women, anything that they do regarding their children is a negative on their career mark. And it's the culture of our work environment. So those are two simple examples of my male privilege. When it comes to white privilege, I want to stipulate, first of all, white people should not feel guilty about being white. You're born white. I'm born black. Other people are born in other ways. None of us should feel guilty about how we're built and the way we were born. And I don't think that any kind of guilt is useful in this conversation of trying to make change. I think that guilt is a negative emotion that doesn't produce anything. For example, I think all of us who are able-bodied, we shouldn't feel guilty about our ability to walk, but we can certainly recognize that disabled people face systemic challenges, that our society is built for able-bodied people to move around easily in it. It's not really built for disabled people. And so there are some accommodations that need to be made so that disabled people can have equal access to able-bodied people. But without that, they face these systemic challenges. So again, guilt is not a useful emotion. I don't think that white people should feel guilty. I don't think that men should feel guilty. I don't think that able-bodied people should feel guilty, but we can certainly recognize that other groups face systemic challenges that we don't. All right, so we contribute, any of us, we contribute to the asymptomatic spread of an ism when we enjoy the benefits of privilege without being aware or even acknowledging that privilege exists in the first place. And so that if we're completely unaware that we have privilege, then yeah, we're part of that asymptomatic spread of whatever the ism is. And so I want to talk about privilege. So I was born with a set of genes. Then these genes were going to produce a certain height, weight, speed, and power ratio. I had muscles that responded well to weightlifting, and I had bones, tendons, and muscles that were somewhat impervious to injury. I didn't get injured easily. And these genes made me part of a favored class for football. But my privilege is not that I'm genetically superior, because I'm not genetically superior. These same genes lead me to be more likely to have diabetes and heart disease and colon cancer. These same genes, if I was born at a different time, would have made me a slave. These same genes, when I'm in an academic setting, hold me back from opportunities that I might have. And so, but these genes made me a fit for a certain category in our society that I'm going to talk about a little bit more. We hear the word privilege as an attack on our accomplishments. Like if somebody says, you've got privilege, it means that you didn't work hard for all the things you got. And I think, well, that's crazy. Of course I worked hard. I mean, I busted my ass on the football field. I was out in the sun in South Texas in two-a-days in August. Fighting, I fought through injuries, I fought through pain, I fought through fatigue, all the hours spent studying tape, all the hours spent in the weight room, all the effort and preparation and all the stuff that I had to do. Don't tell me that I made it to the NFL on my privilege. It's not, I didn't make it because I was privileged, I made it because I worked really hard. And I think that anyone who hears the word privilege has that kind of reaction, especially if you're successful. You're like, you're denigrating everything that I've accomplished in my life by just chalking it up to, oh, well, you're privileged, that's why you did it. Well, that's not really what privilege means. What I can acknowledge is that privilege is the system that I was born into. Privilege is the system that was designed to be easier for people like me. I was a black child. When I started playing football at 8 years old, I was either the only black child or one of two black children, and I wanted to play running back. And the coach said, yeah, I think you'd be a good running back. So he put me at running back, and I got to carry the ball a lot, and I got to get used to what that felt like and how to do it. And so for me, at age 8, I got to be a running back. There were many other kids who wanted to be running backs. I got to be the running back, and I gained a little bit over those other kids because now I had more experience than them. And at 9 years old, it happened again. And at 10 years old, it happened again. And it happened at every level of my career that I got more opportunities than the other kids did. I got more chances to make up for my mistakes. There were plenty of guys who they would fumble once and they get pulled out of the game. I kept getting put back in the game. I had a game when I was in high school. I fumbled 3 times. The coach never took me out. I had a game in college where I fumbled 3 times. The coach never took me out. This is my privilege is not that my genes are superior. My privilege is that my genes were a fit for a system that favored me. And that system meant that I was going to get more and more opportunities, more than my peers were going to get. I was going to have an easier path to where I wanted to go. I was going to get recruited harder. My mistakes were going to be forgiven more, and I was going to end up in the NFL. I had to work really hard to get in the NFL, but there could have been somebody who was right next to me working just as hard who didn't have the genes that I had that the system favored, and that person would not have made it to the NFL. And so this is just a simple example of what privilege looks like in my life and how it has eased my path along the way. I think privilege on a broader scale means that you rarely bump into mainstream systems that are not designed for you. That when you're going through your life, white privilege, I think, means that when you go into a bank, that bank is not going to reject you because you're white. When you're trying to buy a home, you're not going to have neighborhoods that are excluded to, not good neighborhoods, that are excluded to you because you're white. When you walk up to this building for whatever purpose you need to go into this building, these stairs are an invisible thing to you. Like all of us able-bodied people, we pop up these 6 stairs. We don't even think about them. We don't even realize there were stairs there. But for disabled people who arrive at this building, these stairs are a significant barrier that keeps them from going where they want to go. This is what privilege is. It just smooths the path a little bit because the system is designed for your success. And so being aware of that privilege is one way that we stop being part of the asymptomatic spread. Another way is that if we actively use our privilege to our advantage or weaponizing our privilege against other people, calling the police on black people is weaponizing privilege. There's a long history of lynchings, and I'm not going to show you any pictures of it in my presentation, but if you Google just the term lynching and then click on images, and you'll see that black people getting lynched in the South because a white woman said, he said something to me, or he did something to me, and a mob would form and that guy would get lynched. Even if the police arrived first and took him into custody, the mob would go to the police station, take him from the police station, burn him, lynch him, and you can see pictures of it. And so calling the police on black people has a long history, and for us, it's like a threat to our lives. Like you're playing with fire in our lives. The third way that we contribute to asymptomatic spread of isms is that we don't do anything to help people who lack our privilege get an equal opportunity. So what I love about your culture of care is you guys are recognizing in your industry you have the power to do something, and you're doing it. And by doing that, you're refusing to be part of the asymptomatic spread of these isms. And I found for me that I realized that I can use my privilege to encourage female voices, that when I see somebody get cut off, I can say, hey, Jennifer, finish your point. I'm curious to hear what you said. And now people are going to listen to Jennifer, not because they're listening to Jennifer, but because they respect my privilege as a man. As a man, I said, I'm curious to hear that. And so now I'm using my privilege to help her have a voice. That's not a long-term solution. She needs to have her own voice, but I feel like it's a way for me to try to recognize that this is happening and do something about it. One other way that I try to do is I try to point out sexism when I see it or hear it. And, you know, you can't go around the world being in a fight all the time with everybody. So I try to be joking about it. But I was at a poker game one night and one of my buddies said, hey, I can't play next Tuesday because I've got to babysit my kids. And I was in the right frame of mind where I heard that as a sexist statement. I might not have heard it like that before, but I heard it like that. And so I made a joke. I said, are these your kids? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I don't think you call it babysitting when it's your kids. I think you call it parenting. I mean, and we all laughed about it. But to me, it's important to deflate these little moments of sexism or homophobism or whatever ism pops up. And I choose to do it with humor, but to just point it out, to just not let it pass me by and just laugh at it as if it's nothing, because this idea that watching kids is women's work, and if a man is doing it, he's doing a favor to his wife or he's babysitting. No, he's a parent. He has an equal responsibility to take care of his kids. All right, and then the final way we contribute to the asymptomatic spread of isms is that we blame non-privileged people for not achieving the success that our privilege has helped us to achieve. You know, in the Black community, this is a really difficult challenge that our community is well behind the white community in wealth creation and in career advancement and in many measurable categories across our whole population. And it's not by accident. You know, even here in Denver, when the Black people all had to live in 5 Points, and, you know, coming back from the war, let's say two guys come back from World War II and they both have VA benefits, and the white guy can buy a house in many neighborhoods and get a VA loan to do it, and the Black guy is relegated to 5 Points, and VA says, well, we're not going to insure loans in 5 Points because it's a dilapidated neighborhood. And so this wealth disparity is not an accident. It is part of this long history of discrimination against Black people. And I think if we don't recognize that and try to understand that that's part of the cause of this, then we're part of the asymptomatic spread of these isms. All right, so again, this is my family. This is Stephanie and Malik when Malik was about 4 years old. This is him at his 8th grade continuation. He's heading into high school, and now he attends Marine Military Academy, a high school, a boarding school down in Texas. And he's a junior there, and he's doing great. And, you know, here we are, these 3 happy people, smiling people, nice people, educated people, but society sees us as a threat. And I know this because at my 52 years of life, I have seen the way that people respond to me. And the analogy that I came up with is systemic racism is system structures, beliefs, and enforcement that produce advantages for one race and disadvantages for another race. And I think a Labrador Retriever and a Rottweiler kind of illustrate what that is. If white people are Labrador Retrievers and Black people are Rottweilers, this is the difference in the experience, that Labrador Retrievers are universally loved. They're universally accepted. They're universally petted. They're universally cooed at by people. They're welcome in coffee shops, welcome in hardware stores, welcome on sidewalks, welcome in cars, welcome in parks, welcome around children. If their transgressions are forgiven, if a Labrador Retriever bit somebody, then people would instantly say, oh, well, that kid must have been doing something really bad to that dog, or that dog must have been scared or confused or something, you know, and they immediately make apologies for the dog. And if they ever did call animal control on the dog, no one in the world would call animal control on a Labrador Retriever. But if they did, the animal control officers would get out of the car and would be very kind to that dog, maybe give him a treat, pat him on the head, and walk him and gently put him in a leash and walk him into their van. Rottweilers are universally feared, universally rejected, universally avoided, universally stared at, unwelcome in coffee shops, unwelcome in hardware stores, unwelcome on sidewalks, unwelcome in cars, unwelcome in parks. Children are sheltered from them. Transgressions only confirm their fear. If a Rottweiler bites somebody, nobody tries to make excuses for it. They just say, well, it just confirms these dogs are dangerous, so you shouldn't be around these dogs. If you call animal control on a Rottweiler, those animal control officers, when they get out of their vehicle, they are armed to the teeth and they are prepared to do whatever they have to do to get this dog into submission. And so this difference leads to the people calling the police on Black people who are waiting in a Starbucks, or Black people who are barbecuing at the park, or a Black 8-year-old who's selling water on the sidewalk, or a Black Yale student who's sleeping on a couch in her own dorm, or a black man making a quiet phone call to his mother in his hotel lobby, or black women who are sworn by the police when they're leaving their Airbnb rental, or just being black and walking down the sidewalk, or being black and driving a car, or being black and walking across the street, or being black and shopping in Walmart. This guy watched them shop, watched them check out, watched them pay for everything, and then tried to stop them in the parking lot and accuse them of something. Another officer showed up and said, yeah, gentlemen, you're free to go. This guy he's an off-duty cop trying to enforce something. Being black and jogging, Ahmaud Arbery, who was out jogging and got murdered on the side of the road. Being black and going to a swimming pool. Like in all these instances, all these people were guilty of is just being black and doing very normal things. But as a Rottweiler, these very normal things feel threatening to people. And I have experienced this threat in a lot of ways, or the unconscious threat. It happens the clearest when I'm on an elevator. And if I'm standing, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. But if I'm standing on an elevator and that elevator door opens and I'm the only person on the elevator and there's a white person on the other side of that, I see this momentary flinch when they see me, and then they recover and they get on the elevator. But I see it and I'm aware of it. And it's not just that I'm black. It's also that I'm 300 pounds. It's also that I'm 6'2". It's also that I'm a man, right? All of those things are part of this equation. But I see society's reaction to me over and over and over again in my 52 years, that I understand that people are afraid of me. That the way that when you're walking down the sidewalk now, and you'll see people get off the sidewalk in advance because of COVID, and we see that a lot right now, but that's been my experience for most of my life, is that I see people from a block away making a calculation about whether they think it's safe to pass me or not, or pass close to me or not. And so that is part of my life. I understand that society has a fear of me. And so then finally, to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to just share why most Black Americans appreciated Colin Kaepernick's peaceful protest. That Colin Kaepernick was expressing a difference in perspective that white people and black people have about the police. So I think that we all share a similar perspective of firefighters. We all see firefighters as public servants. We all see firefighters as heroic. We all see firefighters as earnest and sincere and willing to put their lives on the line to save us. I think universally, black people and white people see firefighters that way. And my conversations and my understanding of white people is that most white people see police officers that way too, that they're earnest, they're public servants, they're hardworking, they take risks on behalf of all of us, they're good people, they want to do the best, and they're always trying to do the best. As a black man, I can tell you that's not the officer that I meet on the side of the road. When it's just me and him on the side of the road, it's the officer I meet is much more aggressive, is much more threatening, is much scarier, is much more, I feel like my life is in danger every time I've ever been pulled over, that I need to keep my hands in view. I need to say, yes, sir, no, sir. I need to do everything I can to survive this traffic stop. And it might seem crazy to feel that way, but my life experience has been, that is how police officers approach me. And police officers are very aggressive with black people. We've seen more and more video all the time. This is just from a few weeks ago in Aurora with this family. They're handcuffing these kids on the hot tarmac, and it wasn't even the right family or the right vehicle. Even if it was, it's like, is this the response that the police should have? And I want to show you this very short video. It's 1:46. And I want to tell you, you're not going to be watching somebody get shot. No one's getting killed in this video. But it's about a black family in Fort Worth that called the police because a white man grabbed her 7-year-old son by the back of his neck and tried to force him to pick up a piece of paper on the ground. And so the officer arrives, and you can barely, his words are kind of muffled. So I'm going to tell you what they say so you can hear it. The mom says, he shouldn't put his hands on my son. The officer says, why don't you teach your son not to litter? The woman says, well, it doesn't matter. He doesn't have the right to put his hands on my son. The officer says, why not? The mom says, because he doesn't. What do you mean? The officer says, I'm just asking. And the mom says, because he doesn't. And the officer says, well, he broke the law, meaning her 7-year-old son. And so let me show you this video. but you can hear what he's saying.
You know that my house is a door in between yours. You could have came to me. Don't put your hands on my son.
All right. Well, why don't you teach your son not to litter?
I didn't. He can't prove to me that my son littered. But it doesn't matter if he did or didn't. It doesn't give him the right to put his hands on it.
Why not?
Because he don't. It don't. What you mean?
I'm just asking.
Because it don't.
Huh?
It don't. He's not his parent. He's not his parent.
Okay. Why?
So he don't
Why
need to put his.
are you yelling at me?
Because why would you ask me? Why don't I teach him? You don't know what I teach him.
Okay.
And you don't. Your kids don't mean that they go by your rules when they're not in
Why are
your
you
sight.
yelling at me?
Because you just pissed me off telling me what I teach my kids and what I don't.
If you keep yelling at me, you're gonna piss me off. I'm gonna take you to jail.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
You're
under arrest. Get on the ground! Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! Now you're on just arrest. You're going to jail. Now, get on the ground now! On the ground now!
Don't move! Don't move! You on live. Everything you just did is on live. I promise you that. I didn't do nothing. You on live.
Hands behind your back.
You on live. I'm glad. You on live.
Get on the ground! Anybody who has to interfere, they're going to jail too.
Stop fucking crazy. You a bitch. You a bitch. You on live.
Get up. Get up.
And so, this is this is the Black experience with the police, right? That the police officer arrives, he's not that interested in the crime that was committed. He's not that interested that this man grabbed a 7-year-old boy and he baits this woman into reacting to him and then humiliates them, that she's humiliated on the ground, and her 15-year-old daughter is getting arrested for what? For being upset that a grown man assaulted their 7-year-old son. And I just think if the races of these people were reversed, can you imagine that a black man grabbed a 7-year-old white boy by the neck and the family called the police? Can you imagine that the police officer would end up arresting the white mother and the white 15-year-old daughter? It's impossible. But in the Black community, this is our experience with the police. And so this is the reason that Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, that the police aggression toward Black people is what he was talking about. And so this is a national anthem in August of 2016. Can you see Colin Kaepernick down on this sideline? He's down there. It's hard to see. I'm going to zoom in for you. That's him sitting on the bench. So he was sitting on the bench, and this was the second game that he had done it. Nobody noticed when he first started this protest. He was just doing it quietly to himself. When they asked him about it, he said, I'm not going to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. And so many Black people live in absolute terror of the police. From a Black perspective, these police officers are very scary. They're heavily armed. They've got masks on, bulletproof vests. 3 of these guys have their muzzles pointed at this guy. This guy is wearing a t-shirt. He's not a threat, but to them, he's the threat. And to our society, he's the threat. Colin Kaepernick was trying to bring awareness to this issue, but former Green Beret and former NFL player Nate Boyer talked to Kaepernick and said, you know what, I recommend that you take a knee rather than sitting on the bench, because he said in the military tradition, taking a knee is how we pay tribute to fallen soldiers. In the military, taking a knee is how we show respect to the men we've lost. In the military, taking a knee is how we honor the memory of soldiers that we've lost. When we present the flag to a family at a funeral, the man often takes a knee to present that flag. In religion, we kneel before God in the Catholic faith. We kneel before God in the Baptist faith. We kneel before God in the Muslim faith. We kneel before God in the Jewish faith. When somebody dies and we want to play honor to them, the flag takes a knee, flying at half mast. When you want to propose to the love of your life, you take a knee. In every context, taking a knee is a sign of respect. And so Colin Kaepernick, after this conversation with Nate Boyer, said, yeah, I'm just trying to bring attention to the issue of police brutality against Black people. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. So yeah, I'll take a knee because that's much more respectful. And so he and Ed Reed started taking a knee. And when the San Francisco 49ers were asked about it, they said, hey, the anthem is an important part of our pregame ceremony. We respect the right of freedom of expression of our individuals to participate or not participate. Megan Rapinoe with the National Women's Soccer League started taking a knee. And when she asked, she said, I'm doing it to protest against oppression. Brandon Marshall took a knee. When they asked him about it, he said, I'm doing it to fight against social injustice. 4 Miami Dolphins players took knees, and when they asked about it, they said it's to protest the treatment of African Americans by police officers. Marcus Peters with Kansas City held up his fist. When asked about it, he said, I'm supporting Colin Kaepernick. Martellus Bennett and Devin McCourty with the Patriots, they held up their fist. When asked about it, Bennett said, my dad served 10 years. I was born on a Navy base in San Diego. I grew up in a military family. I want to bring around attention on what's going on and how we can bring change. 3 Eagles players held up their fists, and when they said it, they said they're standing in solidarity with people who are being oppressed. So throughout the 2016 season, these players stood up for others by taking a knee. They were protesting against police brutality. You know, a year later, it got political, and the narrative became that black athletes hate America, disrespect the flag, and disrespect the military. But, you know, these men all along had been saying what this was about to them. It was about police brutality. And so finally, to close this out, I know I've gone over my 20 minutes. Sorry about that, Michael. But close this out. So my son, this is, you know, my son, these same pictures again. My society sees my son as a threat. He's now 6'1". He weighs 200 pounds. He's a junior. This summer, he got his first job. He was working at Wendy's. He was working a 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. shift. He would walk to work at 6 p.m. to get there at 6. But at 1 a.m., I would get up out of bed and go pick him up. It's only a mile away from our house. He could walk home. And one of my friends said, well, are you worried about gangs or people on drugs? I said, no, I'm not worried about gangs or people on drugs. I'm worried about the police. I'm worried, like my son is, he doesn't look like an easy target, first. So he might not be targeted. But if he is, he can run. He could fight. He could run back to Wendy's. He could call me. I could go help him. If he's attacked by any regular citizen, he has ways to defend himself. But if he's walking and the police see him, they think, what's this guy doing out at this time of night? He can't be up to any good. And then when they stop him, he can't run. And he better respond perfectly with his hands and with his tone of voice to make sure that he stays safe. And there's nothing that anyone can do to help him if that starts to go bad. No one can intervene on his behalf. No one can help him. And so my fear for my son is of the police more than anything else in his life. And I know that might sound crazy to people who don't see the police the way that we do, but if you're an African-American father and you have an African-American son, I guarantee you talk to any African-American, this is like our #1 fear for our sons, how they're going to deal with traffic stops. So thank you again for having me and for listening to that. And I'm eager to hear any comments or questions or thoughts that you may have.